Hey brother! Ben, maybe my favorite part about a new Pixar movie being released is that we get to discuss how it fits into the almighty Pixar Theory. Today, we discuss Cars 3 and where it fits in. If you don't know what the Pixar Theory is, it is the idea that every single Pixar movie exists in one universe on one giant timeline. The original Pixar Theory was written by a guy named John Negroni, and I would leave a link to his website down in the description below. He has a great visual timeline, which is a good way to get caught up to speed quickly. But that being said, our version of the Pixar Theory here at SuperCarlinBrothers is a little bit different from John, so I'll also put a card in the corner so you can click that. You can watch an entire timeline of our version of events. And final quick warning, this video will include spoilers for Cars 3 and 2 and 1. Here we go. Cars, for me, has always been the trickiest series to fit into the Pixar Theory because their universe just seems to raise so many questions. Like, they appear to have their own timeline, they refer to specific dates in the 1950s, and yet clearly live in a world that is like left over from humans. So what's going on? Well, before we discuss Cars 3, maybe we should discuss where Cars and Cars 2 already fit into the Pixar Theory. The Cars series takes place after, Up, and before / kind of during the events of WALL-E. In Up, we can see the construction crew working around Carl's house works for B&L, or By and Large, and that they're currently in the process of remodeling a previously suburban area into a vast city. And as the story goes inside the Pixar Theory, the mega corporation B&L is sort of slowly gaining power all the time throughout the Pixar universe, and eventually sort of takes over the globe and then over pollutes it to the point where all of the humans have to leave, where we see them in WALL-E. And after they leave, the planet is left without humans, which leads to the rise of cars. But so then how are the cars coming to life? Well, with the rise of self-driving cars seeming to be right around the corner here in the real world, and the Pixar Theory suggesting that B&L is actually run by faceless artificial intelligence behind the scenes, courtesy of Syndrome and the Omnidroid, it was an easy jump to suggest that the cars were the products of artificial intelligence. But that doesn't really fit the narrative as well as it sounds. And what I mean is that B&L's goal in the Pixar universe never seems to be to take over the planet with their own race of beings. It's always to make the lives of humans better and better at any cost, often via consumerism and capitalism. I mean, just look how they treat all of the passengers on the Axiom. Plus, the time doesn't seem to add up. We know in WALL-E the humans are only gone for 700 years, and yet the cars have memories of like the 1950s. So you could have argued that maybe the cars started their own timeline, but then 1950 years is more than 700, so what gives? Well, the new thought is that the cars aren't coming to life because of artificial intelligence, but that they're coming to life the same way that the toys come to life, the same way that monsters fuel their cities, with human emotions and energy. So it's very similar to the toys, where human emotion kind of acts as a battery that brings them to life, but with a few key differences. For one, the cars obviously weren't coming to life while the humans were still around, like the toys did, and they are still cars, so they do still need fuel to operate. Also, unlike toys, which are designed to be brought to life by a child's imagination, whatever form that may take, whether it's a cowboy doll or a dog that's part slinky or a walking rearrangeable potato, cars are not built with the idea that children will play with them and thus do not have pre-existing personalities. So instead, cars take on the personality of their previous owners, complete with memories, but remembered through a carified world. So, like, for example, Doc Hudson remembers his own career-ending crash in the 1950s, but actually what's happening is that he is remembering the crash his previous driver had during that same time, but experiencing it as if it was his own memory. So the cars having their old driver's memories actually clears up the whole years problem, but it does bring up a new question. How can there be a new generation? Like, if all the cars are just taking their old drivers' personalities, how can there be new generations of drivers? Wouldn't they have always just existed? Like, wouldn't Jackson the Storm have been around at the same time as Lightning McQueen? Why aren't the fastest, most modern cars already there? Well, it would appear that the cars wake up, if you will, in the same order in which they were cared for. Like, for example, Lightning was clearly driven and loved by his previous driver long before Jackson Storm was even built, so he wakes up earlier. Kind of like if you took the human timeline right here and just moved it here. Time is sort of moving this way for the humans and the cars are waking up sort of at the same time, just in the future. And if you're still not convinced, if you're sitting at home thinking, yeah, that sounds great, but it's awfully convenient, if you're still not sold that the Cars world was previously the humans world, that's where Cars 3 comes in. Cars 3 all but confirms it with one scene. It's the scene where Lightning is racing on the beach and trying to teach Cruz to do the same. She's starting to get the hang of it when at one point she comes to a screeching halt and says, "I didn't want to hit the little crabbies." It's such a tiny little thing, and yet it is this massive connective force between the Cars world and the past. Because, I'm sorry, crabs? Crabs? Living, biological, non-car crabs? If this is an all Cars world and always has been, what are the crabs doing there? Actually, fun fact, you can see living birds in the Cars world as far back as Cars 1. But it is interesting specifically that it is crabs, because humans are supposed to have left the world because of pollution, right? Well, in Finding Dory, we see Marlin, Nemo, and Dory traveling through an underwater junkyard. I mean, there is trash everywhere, and it seems to have left the area completely devoid of sea life, except crabs. Well, crabs and a giant bioluminescent firefly squid, which was just awesome. But the point is that even early on, we see that of all creatures, crabs are able to survive in pollution where other creatures are not. So how fitting is it that of all creatures Cruz could have run into, it's crabs. Finding Dory also offers up another Easter egg to suggest that the cars are taking on the personality of their former drivers in the form of this tiny little band-aid with Lightning's logo on it, suggesting that whoever drove Lightning when the humans were alive is alive during the time of Finding Dory, and this truck driver is a fan. Speaking of living things though, another question you might be asking is, why are there so many trees in Cars 3? The Eve probes in WALL-E are supposed to be going back looking for vegetation, right? So how is it that they're missing giant forests like this? Glad you asked. I have several explanations for you. First of all, we don't know that all vegetation died off before the humans had to leave. It could have been bad enough that they needed to leave without all plant life having died. And we don't know that the Eve drones are searching the entire planet. They may just be targeting areas they knew to be extremely polluted to see if vegetation has returned there. Not to mention, it's possible that even if Eve drones are bringing back tons of vegetation, it's possible that none of them have successfully made it to a Starliner captain yet. The captain we meet in WALL-E outright says, but none have ever come back positive before. And while I'm sure this is the first one he's seen come back positive, there were 6 captains before him, and we don't know if any of them had a similar situation. And by similar situation, I mean to have an Eve drone return back positive only to have its plant life removed prematurely by the autopilot. Because here's the thing, the AI is determined not to return home. Even if the planet was 100% healed, the AI is just carrying out its directive. Every drone could be coming back, and they are trying not to go home. That being said, the planet we see in WALL-E is still a lot browner than the one we see in Cars, but I think that's because of the cars. I mean, imagine if every single living being on the planet was constantly burning fossil fuels 24/7, 365. That's gonna go ahead and make everything a lot worse and really fast. It's definitely going to use up whatever fuel was left, which we already see being a concern in Cars 2, and it's eventually going to kill the cars off after they finally use it all up. Honestly, I think the cars go down exactly the same way the humans do, right down to BNL. Because we see BNL raise its ugly head for the first time in the Cars series in Cars 3, the same time Jackson Storm shows up. And if cars represent represent their former owners, then Jackson Storm represents a generation of humans that was starting to become too reliant on machines. And just one generation after Lightning, suggesting that the humans start taking this turn just one generation after finding Dory. And one final thought. If the cars weren't just recently active, you tell me how this car alarm goes off. Are you telling me that 700 years later that battery is still good?
I don't think so.
And Ben, that's how Cars 3 fits into the Pixar theory. Ben, my question for you and everyone else is, have you seen Cars 3? What did you think of it? How many Easter eggs did you spot? We spotted quite a few on our first pass. Let me know in the towel section down below. These socks are amazing! Guys, thanks for watching. As always, please remember to like this video if you haven't already and subscribe so you don't miss any future Pixar theory videos from us. If you want to see our full review of Cars 3, you can check out this video right here. Or if you want to find out the full true story of Andy's dad, you can check this video right here. Or the guy we talked to, Mike Mozart, we did a 90-minute full interview with him. You can see that full thing on the exclusive feed of our Patreon page. But Ben, that's all I've got for you today, man. I will see you in another life, brother.